Nazim Sadykhov coming in at minus 240, representing Azerbaijan, going up against Matthias Camilo, who comes in at plus 205. Now, Sadykhov coming in, like I said, as the minus 240 favorite, is looking to bounce back from his first UFC defeat, where he got knocked out by Fares Ziem in the second round of their fight, and that halted a lot of the momentum for Nazim. Nazim was on an 12 fight unbeaten streak. And the reason I say unbeaten is because he had that draw to Vyacheslav Borshev stuffed in there. But he's a guy that I would often look to fade, and I'd be so close in a lot of these spots, right? His fights, they have a lot of volatility in them, and he always had seemed to get the bounce in his favor. And I'm sure at a certain point you got to just be like, okay, he's good enough to just keep going out there and get wins. But I think the Fares Ziem fight kind of showed us like there are beatable aspects in his game, and Ziem was fully able to expose that. So like I want to just quickly highlight some of these things I'm talking about, the volatility in his fights. The Evan Elder fight, he was losing that fight. He was down, I believe, on all three scorecards going into that third round. Then he lands a knee to open up a fight-ending cut on Elder, and he gets a TKO cut win there in the third round. He got dominated in the first round entirely by Terrence McKinney before McKinney gassed out and ended up getting finished in the second round. He was losing the majority of that Vyacheslav Borshev fight, and he nearly finished Borshev in the second round. Again, outside of that, he was losing most of that fight, but two judges scored that second round a 10-8 for Sadykhov, hence why we ended up getting a majority draw there. So for the fact that Borshev was able to battle back in that third round after nearly getting it finished in the second, a little bit more ammo to what I meant in terms of Sadykhov having a beatable style. The Bonfim fight, very competitive until Bonfim had an injury to his eye that stopped the fight after the first round. Again, it was caused by Sadykhov, so I'll give him his props there. The Nicholas Mota fight nearly gets finished multiple times in that first round. Mota clearly gasses himself out trying to finish Sadykhov. Sadykhov comes back in the second round and gets to finish himself. So finally, in the Ziem fight, we see Ziem fight very intelligently and eventually find his finish over Sadykhov in the second round of that fight. Now, I'm not trying to say Sadykhov sucks. He's a solid fighter. I think he deserves a UFC roster spot. That's not the argument here whatsoever. But he's just been winning a lot of these fights on such thin margins and such weird, volatile moments in mixed martial arts that I think often we see him at odds that I don't think he deserves to be at in some of these fights. Like the big number that he was against Nicholas Mota. I think we can all agree that he didn't look, minus 300 or whatever he was against Mota that night, especially considering he nearly got finished in the first round. He has some good power in his hands. He has some decent wrestling, but he's not a guy that's going to be a ranked fighter, in my opinion, especially depending on the route that the UFC gives him or the types of opponents they give him. Now, luckily for him this weekend, I think they're giving him a favorable matchup here in Matthias Camilo, considering he's fighting in Azerbaijan. Camilo was able to bounce back from his UFC debut loss at the hands of Gabe Green, where he ended up getting submitted in the second round of that fight. It seemed like he was having some decent success of his own, but he really struggled, especially as Green started to work out of these bad spots, and it seemed like Camilo kind of gassed out, leading to Green getting that submission spot and forcing the tap from Camilo. But then in his bounce back fight, Camilo was able to land 5 takedowns to grind out Vyacheslav Borshev. And I thought, two of the 3 scorecards had Camilo up 3-0, but I thought it was much closer than what those odds had indicated. It was getting harder for Camilo to grind all those positions in the final 2 rounds, but he did end up getting it done. His cardio is an issue. He doesn't seem to be super confident in his striking, and it's pretty clear that he prefers to drag fights to the ground as soon as he possibly can so that he can get to his jiu-jitsu game and his submission game, but I don't think it's all that high level. Now, he's still only 25, so he might be able to round out some of his game and be a little bit more confident in his striking so he doesn't gas himself out going for desperation takedowns and trying to grind opponents out. So that's obviously something to keep an eye on whenever he steps foot on the cage. And, only coming into his 3rd UFC fight thus far, maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on him at this point in time. Now, like I said, he's going up against Nazim Sadykhov in a fight where I feel it's kind of being favored towards Sadykhov in terms of going out there and trying to get another big win. I think Sadykhov is the better wrestler here. I think even if Camilo is able to get this fight to the ground, Sadykhov has good enough grappling defense that he shouldn't find himself in too compromising of a position. And I think that'll eventually lead to Sadykhov finding big shots to put Camilo away in round 2 or round 3. I'm not too hot on playing a guy like Sadykhov at minus 240. The line is just too wide for me. I'm just not high enough on him. But I think that this is one where we'll see it competitive early, but in those second and third rounds, we'll see Sadykhov start to come on stronger with those big shots, that big power, and I think that eventually leads to a round 2 or round 3 knockout for Nazim Sadykhov.